It's close to the end of the year and you're probably wondering, have I improved as a writer this year? Well, today in this video, I will be giving you 5 common writing mistakes I see newer writers make, and I think this is a good guideline to check in with yourself to see if you're making these mistakes as well, and it's also a good place to start improving. So please make sure you watch all the way until the end. If you would like a part 2, please let me know in the comments below because I came up with more than just 5, but we'll start off with just 5 for now. My name is Kelly. I am a freelance editor. I am the founding editor at Bramble & Crow Books, and I'm also the fiction editor for Augur magazine. More news to come on that. Make sure you follow me at Kelly is Writing. This is my new Instagram for writing specific related content. My other one, Calcify, is very personal, and I've decided to make that switch. Make sure you follow me on that platform if you want to get caught up with the latest writing news from me and also writing tips. I have a checklist down below if you would like to use that as a resource. This would be a really great way for you to check in with yourself to make sure that you are addressing everything I'm saying in this video. So yeah, that's down below, totally free for you to use. Alright, so let's get started with number 1. Number 1, you can fix this ASAP, and if you fix this right away, this will show the people reading your book, either editors or critique partners or beta readers, that you are extremely serious with your craft. And this one is pretty simple. It's formatting. Make sure you format your novel. I'm not talking about anything too outrageous here. I'm talking about 12 font Times New Roman double space. Please indent at every new paragraph, and please use the correct format for dialogue. If you're confused, you can check out the Shun manuscript format. I'll link that down below. This is what most editors use. I work at Augur, as I mentioned, or I volunteer at Augur, and it's ideal for you to submit your short story in that format. This is a format that agents will be familiar with. Formatting plays actually such a huge role in making your book readable. I have gotten books and stories where it was just one giant page with like maybe 2 paragraphs per page of indentation, and this was extremely hard because your reader actually will have a very hard time just reading the book, understanding the words. If you're asking your beta reader to critique your novel and it's not formatted, they're just gonna have a hard time literally understanding what's going on the page, and it would be almost impossible to give feedback because you're trying so hard to understand what's going on the page. So yes, please make sure you format your book. This will just show everyone that you are super serious and that you are willing to learn, you're willing to follow guidelines that are industry standard. Of course, you can draft in whatever you like, but this is some mistake that I constantly see newer writers make. When you read a book, everything is nicely formatted, so I think to an extent that writers think it's given for granted, like take it for granted, but it's not. So please do your due diligence and format your book so it can be, at the most minimum, readable for your beta readers, your critique partners, or your editors. My hair is getting in the way. Okay, number 2 is setting. I feel like setting is not spoken about as much in our community, which I think it actually should be. So for me, setting is not necessarily about info dumping. I think a lot of writers have that fear of info dumping. So what I'm seeing now is the opposite of info dumping. It's not grounding your readers in the physical world. And I've seen this so many times when I'm working with newer clients or even slush reading. I'm just asking myself like, hey, where are we? It's really difficult for your readers to get immersed in your world if they don't have a good sense of being grounded to your story. And this is especially important if you're writing a secondary world, because in a secondary world, your reader is not going to be familiar with anything. And as a writer, I think that we tend to, well, we obviously know more, so we think that's translated onto the page, but I would caution every new writer to make sure that you know where your characters are in their spatial distance between a tree over there or a desk over here, how your character is physically moving in the world. That's very important to know because it might seem like your characters are floating in space. Your readers are going to have a hard time imagining this, and they're going to have a hard time understanding other emotional stakes that come with setting. For example, if I'm in a car and I'm arguing with my mom, that is going to have a different implication than me being in a line at, I don't know, a K-pop concert and arguing with my mom. These settings have different context, and so having clear setting can also imply subtext and tone, and it can also relate to characterization. How your characters react to the setting will give readers more implication of who your character is. Another example of this is that if you're going in between A to B and it's supposed to only take one day, but your scenes are making it seem like it's taking more than one day, like it's 2 nights, then your reader might be confused and it might seem like the timeline is not flowing with the setting of the world, and that perhaps you need to make the places further apart, or you need to shorten that action beat. Going forward in your writing, I would make sure that your characters are constantly proactively reacting to the setting and make sure they're engaging with the setting, because the words on the page is what your character, sorry, not your characters, your readers, it's what they will be looking at. Number 3 is subtext. Subtext, my favorite topic. Subtext is essentially text and context. That equals subtext. There is a really great video essay on subtext, mostly for screenwriters. I think that intention, the audience was for screenwriters, but all novelists can use that video too. Sorry, I'm like blubbering now because that siren is distracting me. Subtext is what is not said, the underlying meaning behind dialogue. One common mistake I see a lot of new writers make is that these characters are saying exactly what they're thinking. And for the most part, I don't think this is like a special characterization. I actually just think that this is dialogue that needs to be improved by the writer. When you look at any 2 people speaking, they are never saying what is on their mind unless they're having a giant explosive fight or they're in therapy or something like that. Most people only say 10% of what they're thinking, and I think this was linked in that video that I was talking about. And here is an example. I kind of pulled it from that video, but I think it will make more sense in our novel world. So if you're writing an enemies to lovers, there's going to be tension between the main couple, right? One of the characters in this couple might not outright say, "I love you" immediately. Before making that big reveal and saying what they're thinking, they're probably going to say something like, "I can't stand you." But as they're saying, "I can't stand you," they're in close proximity. You know, the guy's like leaning his hand against the wall and the girl's saying, "I can't stand you." That's subtext. That doesn't mean I can't stand you. That kind of means I probably want to bang you, right? But your character is not going to outright say that. So that's like a very clear example of subtext. And I would make sure that you are using subtext throughout your piece, or else the dialogue comes across as a little bit stilted and not as natural. Of course, like there are going to be moments where your characters are going to be saying what's in their head, but that should be very intentional. That should be more relevant to beats where your characters are revealing something or finally coming to an end of a conflict, finding a resolution. One way to make sure you are including subtext, I think you should just ask yourself, what's my intention with this dialogue? What's my intention with these 2 people chatting? And then decide whether or not how much subtext you want to include. It can go a very long way just because subtext is so natural in the way we speak. If you think about your own personal experiences, when have you ever really confessed something that you're actually saying every single word in your head? It's not very common. I think the only time I do it is probably when I'm trying to resolve a conflict with my partner, but usually no one wants to hear my thoughts, you know? Number 4 is not adding enough tone and emotional stakes to your character or in your entire narrative. I've read a lot of stories where I feel like there is supposed to be something happening. There's supposed to be some emotion that I'm reading in the dialogue, but I actually don't really know what that emotion is. For example, if I'm reading dialogue and there's back and forth discussion, I can interpret that as banter, friendly banter. However, sometimes I interpret it as friendly banter because of the way things are set up, but no, the characters are actually in a heated discussion. In that case, the tone needs to be built up for that this dialogue is actually intense and it's not playful back and forth. And what you will need to do, obviously I think every case is different, but I think for that example, we need to add more internal thoughts to the dialogue, maybe more body language. How are other characters reacting to the situation? And something similar with tone is also making sure that you're not relying excessively on punctuation marks or bold or question marks to indicate confusion. If your character is angry, I would like to see that in their actions instead of having all caps, having exclamation marks in a similar tone. Whoa, in a similar tone. Your character should always be constantly reacting to new situations. One thing I'm finding a lot in newer writers is that I don't see a lot of character reaction, and this is different from what I was saying about reacting to setting. This is actually reacting to things that are going on around them or from what another character is saying. So if there are two characters talking and it's not your point of view character, your point of view character should still be reacting to what's going on around them. One thing that I think should be extremely clear is that your readers are only in the story because of your main character. Your main character is the frame that your readers will be taking along with in their journey. So if your character is not always reacting, not having checks of their internal feelings, your readers are going to feel lost and they're not going to understand why exactly they are following the story. What are the stakes? Remind readers of the stakes of the story and how your character's feeling relate to those stakes. So how do you improve this? Well, I think that it's just about doing more character reflection. I think that sometimes we're so caught up in the beats of the story, we want the next thing to happen, the next thing to happen. But definitely keep in mind that internal description, internal thoughts and feelings, breathing room really goes a long way. Number 5 is excessive action description. I think this is actually the most common. I probably should have put it at number 2 because I see this in almost every newer writer's manuscript. This is when a character or the author describes every single step between A to B. I walked up the stairs, I turned left, and then on my way to the attic, I stopped by the second bedroom, I turned my head and looked at the window, I stomped my feet to go up the 3rd floor. You can cut all that out. I can go on and on. I see this so often, and you do not need to describe every single step. You should only be describing action beats when there is a direct implication in the world building, in the characterization, or the plot. Your readers will not be interested in getting caught up with all these little minute details because they will be asking themselves, well, what's really the point of doing this? And this is a pacing issue. I think the reason why newer writers do this is because they want to guide the readers through what the characters are doing. However, you can just jump from place A to place B. If you're at the basement right now, you can just have a one-line sentence saying they're upstairs. You can have a scene break. It's not necessary for you to describe every single thing in the house. Unless, of course, you're writing Piranesi, or that is the intention of what you're doing. Perhaps this is a haunted house and you want to build up the vibes. In that case, go for it. But I find that these action beats are usually filler and they're just transition scenes trying to get from one place to the other. Those are my top 5 common writing mistakes I see. I have a checklist down below if you want to use that to make sure that you're following certain guidelines. Of course, you can do this whenever. You can do this when you're editing, you can do this when you're writing, but I would highly suggest following these rules. It will make your writing stronger and it will show that you are improving as a writer. If you have more questions or if you need more help, I do offer editing services at bramblecrowbooks.com and you can hire me in the link down below. Thanks so much for watching and I will see you in my next video. Bye!